Now, our social history wouldn't have been captured so well if it wasn't for the newspaper. But that's not directly what we're going to talk about today. Yet, the newspaper from the past 50 years or so had a page that most people had to have a glance at, because every day someone had a personal problem. And there was a trusted person who was knowledgeable and wise and always there to try and solve these quandaries. Have you got it yet? We are going to look back at those agony aunts that I'm sure you will remember, whether you wrote to them, read the articles, or just skipped past the whole lot. So, let's get on with it. Dear Agony Aunts, the Problem Page Girls. Just a little note, I know we do have agony aunts today, but not like the following. Marjorie Proops for the Daily Mirror. Abrupt at times, to the point, didn't dilute her opinions, but always a wise favourite for a stiff upper lip and a trusted aunt. Dear Marge was answering letters of woe and despair for the Daily Mirror for over 40 years. Proops, formerly Rebecca Rail, was born in Woking in Surrey in 1911 to a Jewish family and followed many jobs and studies. Decided to become a journalist. In 1939, she joined the Mirror newspaper as a fashion correspondent. But all that changed when the current agony aunt columnist dropped dead. She stood in and ended up with a job. She had a direct way of responding to people's problems, and the public respected that. Not only for her non-soft soap responses, but the way she used the page in the paper to campaign for rights and changes in the law to help protect people and give the courage to people to report and stand up rather than being a suffering silent victim. For her achievements, Marjorie received an OBE and was voted Woman of the Year in 1984. Why, she even had a waxwork model placed in Madame Tussauds. How about that? Back in 1977, she was handed the Red Book in the programme This Is Your Life. Miss Proops sadly left us in 1996 at the age of 85. The Daily Sun, like it or loathe it. Some people say it's a newspaper, and some say it isn't, but it had its most famous agony aunt in 1980, which spanned for 4 decades until a bout of ill health in 2020, which took her to early retirement. So far, she's doing okay, and we all wish her well. Well, she was quite famous for sending you out her leaflets in the 80s when responding to problems, later advising you to call her advice line. How many letters did she respond to in all those years, eh? I don't know, by the way. Answers on a postcard. We're talking about Deirdre Sanders. Deirdre Sanders was born in 1945 and graduated at Sheffield University. She became a journalist and wrote for a good few publications, including the Sunday Times, before she landed a role as an advice columnist. She was a regular phone-in advisor for ITV's Good Morning show. Her massive accomplishments included publishing mental health awareness, campaigning for people to come forward and speak about their issues, and which she received a well-deserved MBE. And despite losing her husband of 55 years, she continued with her work helping others. Claire Rayner, the direct and not scared to raise a few eyebrows or get letters of complaints sort of lady. She was the Sun agony aunt from 1973, then moved on to the Sunday Mirror in 1980. Her frank approach to sex was to make a few people take a sharp intake of breath, while on daytime TV she demonstrated how to put a condom on. I think she used a cucumber. And how young women should use sanitary towels correctly. It was all pre-Watershed and by request of the BBC. Her approach in responding to problem letters were both frank and compassionate, drawing from her medical history and her own life experiences. Born Claire Berenice Berkovich, she was born in Stepney in London's East End in 1931. As a child, her family moved to Canada for a while before returning to London. During that time in Canada, she became ill with thyroid problems and spent 15 months in a psychiatric hospital. Claire graduated as a nurse in 1951, and in the early 1950s she worked in a few London hospitals. But after her marriage and 2 children, she later worked as a midwife and a head sister in nursing. Wanting to spend more time with a young family, Ms. Rayner left nursing and took up writing letters for newspaper articles, having already written to newspapers regarding nurses' pay and conditions, plus writing books, which by 1968 she had 25 book publications under her belt. These books included The Art of Making Love, a help manual, which brought her well into the public eye, particularly because it was frank and quite explicit, but people welcomed the down-to-earth and frank approach to those books. Her 40-plus years as an Agony Aunt columnist began with a woman's own magazine, and a teenage magazine called Petticoat. Her down-to-earth wording when it came to intimate problems raised eyebrows in the 1970s. She was also a regular on Pebble Mill at 1, giving advice to anybody calling in. Calling everybody dear, if I remember rightly. And in 1987, she had a big surprise. Michael Aspel approached her for This Is Your Life. And she was also named Medical Journalist of the Year. She was a regular phone-in Agony Aunt for TV-AM, and she answered every letter, most of them in her own time and at her own expense, with no extra funding from the TV companies. After patroning for many charities and fighting campaigns for good causes, and I mean loads, she was appointed for the OBE in 1996, despite her own personal health issues. In fact, she raised awareness about them. We lost dear Claire in 2010 following an open surgery operation from which she never recovered, but not without leaving us that very famous quote. Tell David Cameron if he messes up the NHS, I shall be coming back to haunt him. For those who read the Jackie magazine in the 1970s, a fashionable girls' magazine, they could write to Kathy and Claire. In fact, the column existed from the mid-1960s right up until the 1990s. But Kathy and Claire were fictional characters. But teenagers back in the day did get answers from real people, which included Nina Miskoff and Sandy Monks from The Guardian, amongst others. Even though the young girls wrote their stories to the famous Fleet Street, London address, all mail was forwarded to Dundee, the headquarters of the Jackie magazine. The problems were about teenage confidence issues, boy trouble, growing up issues, all from young girls. And they really did help. In fact, they helped 400 people that wrote every single day. Kathy and Claire were never real, but the replies were from genuine people with sound and sincere advice. Unity Hall. Now, I couldn't find a lot about her, but she was an Agony Aunt, advice columnist in the News of the World during the 1960s and 70s. And I found out that she was an occasional panellist on the TV programme Jukebox Jury. She only appeared once. And she was on the Terry Wogan chat show. That's all I know. So what of these tabloid Agony Aunts today? Well, they are still there and people do read them. And maybe the odd item may resonate with them. But people seek advice everywhere today, shifting to digital newspapers, TV shows, research in internet forums, and some may even consult AI. So, of those million letters that have been written to advice aunts over the years, they must certainly have their place